Hi, Mark Cuban. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
So, I want to start off with the debate because obviously that's the biggest piece of news that we're focused on right now. Do you think that Donald Trump made any inroads with those independent voters that he needs to be speaking to after the performance he handed in at this debate?
Depends which way they lean, right? Because there's independent, but very few people are truly independent, right? If you were trying to be objective about it, no, he obviously did not. But if you were looking for certain things, then maybe, right? Because he was everything he is all the time, so you weren't surprised.
Yeah. Well, in a way, if he is who he is, then presumably, if you enjoyed that, you already are supporting him anyway.
Well, you would think so, right? But you might, like, I had friends in Texas, right? Because it's Republican, and it's like, well, you know, I didn't see anything that would stop me from voting for him, right? So he didn't admit to too many crimes, right? He didn't admit to shooting somebody on Fifth Avenue.
I guess when the bar is that low, that like
exactly right, right? But he is who he is.
What do you think about the implications of being able to be baited so easily that all Kamala Harris needed to do was dangle a few things out there, a few crowd size, a few rallies. Your dad gave you money, and she would hook.
It's crazy, yeah. Those are the kind of guys you want to negotiate against, because you can be in a negotiation for any type of business or any type of circumstances and just hit them with something that's going to piss them off or freak them out, and you have the edge, right? Because they're going to lose some of their confidence, and they're going to lose some of their objectivity, and they're going to lose some of their mind. So it's a huge edge.
Well, that goes against the message that he's trying to convey, which is that you want him in the negotiating room against the tough partners. Can you talk in that dichotomy there?
Sure. Oh, of course, right? I mean, it's not like Putin or Xi or any leader of a nation state didn't pay attention, right, and didn't notice what happened. And so, of course, now you might be more subtle in how you approach it. It could be like leaving something on a table in front of Trump, saying Trump crowd size is down 30%. You might not have to say a word, right? It could be someone saying something to one of the other people in the room, right? An assistant talking to an assistant. Boy, we're really sorry to hear that Donald Trump's crowd sizes have fallen, and that just sets everything off. It's just so easy, that's a problem.
Donald Trump also keeps talking about this idea that the way to handle the economy is by imposing tariffs. And he's been corrected about this numerous times, but one hallmark of who Donald Trump is that he never backs down.
Right, of course.
And so because he said it once, this is now his position, and he's going to stay with his position forever.
It's the Roy Cohn School of Management.
Exactly right. Can you talk about what will actually happen if tariffs are imposed as a principle?
So tariffs can encompass multiple things, right? So, and he brought it up in the debate, look, the Biden administration did not remove the Chinese tariffs that he already had in place. And so it's not a bad thing to impose tariffs first when there's a strategic need. So if there's another country like China who is dumping particular products, whether it's washing machines, cars, and they're subsidizing the equivalent of dumping, right? So if that nation state is providing money to the manufacturing or the only manufacturing, so they're competing unfairly, that's okay to impose tariffs on. What doesn't work are revenge tariffs and across-the-board tariffs. Those are a disaster because they affect every product. So if he would have said, and even Kamala, if she would have said, look, tariffs aren't necessarily bad if they're strategic, and that's why we didn't remove the ones that are in place. But the idea of taxing everything and anything specifically because I don't like the people we're from or the country where it's originating is insane, because that truly is the sales tax that Kamala is talking about. And not only is it a tax to be paid on that product that's being imported, but there's also an additional tax on the company, because you have to deal with all the administration of filing the forms for the tariffs, or hiring a broker, dealing with the record keeping. So all these things, particularly if you're a smaller company, right, becomes not just a tariff on the tax on the buyer of the products, or a tax on the buyer of the products, but also a tax on the smaller company that's implementing it, or even a big company for that matter.
We look at Donald Trump, how he handled the economy when he was president, how he did impose tariffs, how he basically dried up federal revenues to make those farmers whole when the trade war kind of went south. And so still you have a lot of people who look back at the Trump economy kind of with rose-colored glasses.
Right.
What do you say to people who say, oh, the economy was better when Donald Trump was president?
Look, we're always nostalgic, right? And the whole idea of being a conservative is to conserve what was already in the past, right? So it's not a surprise. And, you're not going to just all of a sudden get someone to change their mind if their mind is set on that. But we can all give examples of scenarios where, you know, if you just want to do apples to apples, the inflation rate for, I think it was Obama, was like 2.4% on average, and then it went up to 2.9%. With Trump, it was either 1.4 to 1.9 or 2.4 to whatever it is. It increased, right? Yeah. And so it's not like everything was perfect. And you also had a situation where 2018 and 2019, he was asking for the Fed to reduce interest rates because he wanted to pump up the economy, and he wanted more QE, quantitative easing. Well, let me just tell you, QE, quantitative easing, as one of my friends says, is UBI for rich people, right? Because when you push down interest rates like that, the value of expensive assets just go up higher, and more people can afford them. And so while you had an economy where folks like me with a lot of money truly benefited, and there's an inflationary value to assets that we owned, the people who do the work, they didn't have this big beneficial gain. The tax rates didn't help them all that much, right? The prices, while they weren't high, no one was put in a better position to succeed.
When you look at the business community, I think there is kind of this overarching belief that Donald Trump is better for business, if for nothing else than the reason that he just says it a lot.
No,
right?
That's it, right? Yeah.
But if you look at small business applications, for example, right now, they're the highest that they've ever been under the Biden applications under the Biden administration. Can you talk about the dichotomy between what Donald Trump is seeking to do and the purportedly pro-business ideas that he says he's putting forward, with the fact that right now, using this democratic model is when we have the highest small business applications in modern American history.
So business can mean a lot of different things, right? It's a solo entrepreneur who comes on Shark Tank with is the only person in the entire company, had a dream, and this is their American dream. Or it could be, you know, Apple and NVIDIA and the biggest, highest market caps in the world, right? Donald Trump certainly has made an effort to support those larger companies through lower corporate rates, through other types of opportunities that he's created for him. But he's done nothing for the small business person, right? You hear Kamala Harris talking about efficiency when it comes to starting a business. You hear Kamala Harris talking about raising the deduction from $5,000, which is a meaningless number these days in starting a business, to $50,000, right? You hear her talking about child tax credits with, if you're starting a business and you can pay for childcare for, you know, your children or child, that allows you the freedom to go start a business, right? So she's talked over and over again about the economic opportunities that she's trying to create for small to medium-sized business. And she's just used the term entrepreneurs and founders over and over again. You haven't heard that from Donald Trump at all, whether he was in office or since then. That's just not in his DNA. I asked a question on Twitter, had he ever invested in a startup or a company that didn't involve any of his relatives? And nobody could give me an answer, right? I didn't know the answer, and I didn't know what to expect, because there could have been 20 companies he helped somebody, you know, friends of his son, friends of whoever. Nobody came up with a single company. And to me, that says volumes about who he is, because to me, it's rewarding when I go out and invest in startups, right? If I'm helping somebody else chase the American dream or reach the American dream. That's why I do Shark Tank, right? To help all these companies. It's a beautiful thing, right? That's what makes this country different than so many others. He doesn't think that way. And so he's not thinking in terms of smaller companies, startups, the Etsy companies, the eBay resellers, right? He could care less. And to me, that's a great failing. Well, you know, Kamala on the flip side said, okay, we had 5 million or whatever business applications, we're going to 25 million, right? That's what drives the economy. 68% of jobs are from smaller companies.
Is it not just tax cuts for the top one half of 1%?
Because you always have to ask, you know, what changes behavior? And changing corporate taxes from 21, changing from 35 to 21, okay, you can expect some behavior change. Changing from 21 to 15, but also putting constraints that it's only if you are not importing any products, that's ridiculous shit, right? Going from 21 to 28, that's not going to really change anybody's behavior.
Yeah. How cataclysmic is it that we have business leaders, Fortune 500 business CEOs, for example, none of whom have come out in favor of Donald Trump?
I know, it's insane.
For a Republican nominee for president, this is the purportedly pro-business party, for him to have no avowed support from any of these CEOs.
So I'll say this, and it's a little bit off path from what you're getting to. Parties really don't matter right now in this election, right? I think we saw Donald Trump just take over the Republican Party, right? Mitt Romney was the candidate before him. He's nothing like Mitt Romney. He just took it over and made it his. We're seeing the same thing with Kamala, right? This is not about Democratic ideas. This is about Kamala Harris's values and relating to the American people. The opportunity economy. That's what makes this so amazing. And I think that's why so many big business people have gravitated to support the VP, because they understand that Kamala, her values are what are going to make her different. Her values are what makes her stand apart from the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, for that matter. She wants to bring people together, and that's so different from what Donald Trump wants. And that's what companies need in order to be successful. When there's partisanship and division, it's hard to run a business. I gave a speech this morning, right, where we had a conversation, and one of the things they said is don't talk about the election. Because we have Republicans that work here, I should say Trump supporters and Harris supporters. And she understands that, and the CEOs understand that in order to be optimally successful, you need an united country. Just not only from a sales perspective, but just the culture of your organization. You don't want to have to worry about saying the wrong thing because we are so partisan. You want to be able to manage your business, as a unified organization, and that's becoming more and more difficult.
Can you speak for a moment, and then I want to change topics here, but speak for a moment on what the volatility that Trump would bring, how that kind of manifests itself in the business world?
If he doesn't know what he's going to say next, how are businesses going to be able to anticipate or prepare for what comes next? It's critically important to have some sanity and some reliability in laws and in regulations. And I will say, I try to be as objective as possible, right? Where Donald Trump is so, when she talks about chaos, that's absolutely right. But, Kamala has some work to do in terms of like Gary Gensler at the SEC and maybe Lena Khan at the FTC. But the good news is, I think she recognizes that, right? She has said this out loud, that she is for bright line regulations as opposed to regulation via litigation. And I create that contrast because we have no idea where Donald Trump is going. And Kamala Harris has recognized there are frailties and imperfections in the current government. And she's going to do the work to make it so that this is not only great for business, but for the people who work for those businesses and have their own lives they're trying to live.
So the flip side of these CEOs and businesses that we've been talking about is the Silicon Valley billionaires. And a lot of them are going more and more, not only toward Trump, but outspokenly toward Trump. So what's driving this move to the right? Is it just money? Is it just tax rate? Or is it something a little bit more insidious?
It's something, I don't know if it's insidious, but it probably is. First, let me say, there's a lot who are switching back. They just won't say it. Because I'm having those conversations, right? Because I think Joe Biden's administrator made a mistake where he would not even talk to people in Silicon Valley, wouldn't even have a conversation. Kamala is the exact opposite, right? If it's not her, it's people in her campaign that are talking to these folks who felt like, if I can't talk to the administration at all, how can I make sure that we're aligned? Well, Kamala is having those conversations. And I can tell you, I've talked to multiple people who were on those lists of people who supported Trump, who ain't supporting Trump no more. But back to answer your question, I think they believe they can manipulate him. I think they understand that he's so transactional and so devoid of core values that anything that they want, they can manipulate him to get. Now, it's a corollary to the old adult in the room with Trump thing, but the bad news is we saw what happened to the adults who walked into the room. They all turned on him, right? And I think a lot of Silicon Valley has that arrogance. Most very successful entrepreneurs have that arrogance to a certain extent, right? And they believe that they can manipulate them. And I think that's what's happening.
And you can draw a straight line from Peter Thiel to J.D. Vance to Donald Trump. And is that does that fit into the kind of exactly what you're saying?
Yeah, for sure.
That is the influence that they're seeking. It's not like J.D. Vance. If he's funded by the Peter Thiels of the world and then get into the White House, it's not like Donald Trump has any long-held principles, deeply held principles.
And he's 78 years old, right? So if he does get elected, then there's nothing that says he's not going to take a more accelerated path of cognitive decline. And so who's next in line, right? And who is that vice president beholden to? Maybe not overtly, But come on, I don't. Whether it's me or you or somebody invests in our business and gives us a start, you're going to have an obligation to them at some level.
When you have this group of tech billionaires, the Elon Musks of the world, the Mark Zuckerbergs, I mean, you started off your career,
tech, yeah.
In tech. Well, I guess the question is, how did you get out? Like, is this
I'm not out, right?
It's like an escaping Amish
It's
situation.
not Hotel California, right?
But like these guys, I mean, you had Mark Zuckerberg, who I think was looking for any excuse to support Donald Trump, and when we had the
I don't know that
assassination,
he's really supported Donald Trump, right? I know he came out and said, that when Donald Trump unfortunately was shot, it was tragic, and he showed leadership and all that, and that's fine. I think he was just trying to create balance so he could just get out completely.
Yeah.
That was my interpretation.
Elon, on the other hand,
on there is all in.
Yeah.
Elon's all in. I mean, that's why I like to fuck with Elon on Twitter, right?
Yeah.
Because, excuse my French, but
it's all good. This is YouTube, baby.
Okay, so I think Elon, again, the same principle. Elon's one smart guy, right? And I know he believes, he hasn't told me, but I know he believes he's much smarter than Donald Trump. If you listen to the podcast they did together, right, you can tell there's times, particularly as they talked about the environment and nuclear, right,
Yeah.
and DEI, that I could just see Elon rolling his eyes at that time, right?
I got to ask you this,